Hello, my name's Harriott. I'm the Chief Executive and founder of the Liminality Group. I'm a criminologist, sociologist, systemic and psychodynamic practitioner, and I look forward on behalf of the charity Brilliant Parents to joining you down at the Hayes Muslim Centre on the 14th of February this year. We'll be looking at our work within community and custodial settings with complex children, and we'll also be considering some ways to try and keep children safe, but also to give an understanding about the current landscape. Look forward to seeing you there.
Waste of time, the parrot feel this.
Hello, my name's Harriott. I'm the Chief Executive and founder of the Liminality Group. I'm a criminologist, sociologist, systemic and psychodynamic practitioner, and I look forward on behalf of the charity Brilliant Parents to joining you down at the Hayes Muslim Centre on the 14th of February this year. We'll be looking at our work within community and custodial settings with complex children, and we'll also be considering some ways to try and keep children safe, but also to give an understanding about the current landscape. Look forward to seeing you there. Hello, my name's Harriott. I'm the Chief Executive and founder of the Liminality Group. I'm a criminologist, sociologist, systemic and psychodynamic practitioner, and I look forward on behalf of the charity Brilliant Parents to joining you down at the Hayes Muslim Centre on the 14th of February this year. We'll be looking at our work within community and custodial settings with complex children, and we'll also be considering some ways to try and keep children safe, but also to give an understanding about the current landscape. Look forward to seeing you there.
Are you good? Do you want to start?
No.
All right, okay. Who am I calling? Sure, sure. Yeah, the reason I think I'm standing on this side is because of the microphone.
Yes.
Are we okay? Is it okay? Is it sorted?
Yeah, stand in the middle.
Oh, lovely. All right. You want me to stand in the middle? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you. First and foremost, Jazakumullahu khairan, and thank you everyone for coming. Alhamdulillah. First, let's just go through quickly a few of the housekeeping. We all know, alhamdulillah, the fire exits on either side. There's one on that side, one on that side. But if, in case there is an alarm, because there's no fire drills planned, then if you do hear the alarm, then it's an actual one. Make sure that we go downstairs on the right hand side. That's where we gather. Toilets, there's two over here, and some downstairs as well, if anybody needs to use them. That's basically part of the housekeeping sorted out. Anybody feels unwell, etc., let us know. We're here, inshallah. Okay. I want to first and foremost thank every single one of you guys, mashallah, for coming. Hopefully, inshallah, we can get more people very soon. But for those of you who are here, alhamdulillah, this is an important part of our lives, and especially when it comes to these kind of programs. They're extremely important for us to understand many different aspects of our lives, many different things that are going on, the reasons behind it. It gives us, it gives us an idea of the goings on, basically, in the world as well, and how we can become better or supportive, or a support structure for other people as well. So alhamdulillah, it's a good thing that you guys are here. Jazakumullah khairah. Hopefully we can keep on coming to these kind of programs. Extremely important. We have, first and foremost, I'm going to invite Meave. Meave is she's the chief executive of Brilliant Parents, which is a charity that work with parents, enabling them, giving them the tools, how to support their young children, youngsters, adolescents, etc., who are growing up in this country. So today's program is about understanding the complexities of the youth culture. So when you say youth culture, it involves many, many different things, especially in nowadays time, 21st century. There's many, many different things. We have Andrez, like I mentioned. Andrez is going to be speaking more in detail about it. But I would like to first and foremost invite Meave. Meave is going to be speaking to us about Brilliant Parents, and she will introduce the program further. Thank you very much, Meave.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you very
welcome.
much, Sufyan. Hello, and good afternoon to you all. As the Imam said, my name is Meave Daru, and I am the Chief Executive of a charity called Brilliant Parents. We at Brilliant Parents, we're passionate about helping parents with the most difficult job that there is, and that is raising the next generation. We're here today, and we're delighted to be here today in the community, supporting you. Hillingdon Council are very equally passionate about parenting as we are, and so it gives us great pleasure to be here today. So if I just tell you a little bit about what we do, we go in different boroughs within London and outside of London, and we basically provide courses and workshops and seminars on parenting. So, we really feel that, we need to help parents, because children are families. There's a lot of influences out there. And parenting is not like 20, 30 years ago. The landscape of parenting has changed. And so we need to educate ourselves and empower ourselves as to how we can help our children. And that's why we're here today. One of the programs that we offer our parents is called the Parent Champion Program. And we work with volunteers in the community who befriend other parents, particularly those whose parents who feel that their children are at risk of exploitation. So if at the end of this session you feel, actually, I'd like to give back to the community and help other parents with their children, please do come and see me at the end. I'd also like to acknowledge our viewers. We are live streaming today, so our viewers today, we hope that you enjoy today's session. what we're going to do for the next hour, we're going to hear from our speaker, and then after that hour, we're going to have half an hour for questions. And I'm hoping parents, young people, that you will put your questions to Andre, and also those viewing from home, if you have any questions, then please do put your questions in the Q&A. So with that said, it just leaves me to introduce Andre. Andre is a criminologist, a sociologist, and he goes into organizations to talk to them about how we can help our children. He understands our young people, and I think today you are really going to leave here with a better understanding of how you can empower yourselves and also your young people. So please do welcome Andre to the stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you very much, Meave. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you for coming up. Just the speaker joining there. I always say whether we have 5 people in the room or 150 people in the room, it's just as important because the information is just as relevant, and it's for you to take away, for the future, to make smarter decisions within your families, but also for you to be aware of what your children may be facing. Now, some of the language that I'll be using can be a bit academic sometimes, so I'm going to try to simplify it, because if you're not in our discipline, then sometimes that language can, just sound, it can go over your heads. So if I say something quite complex, I'll make sure that I simplify, but overall the language will be friendly for children and for adults. Is that okay? All right, so let's go. I want to just first of all acknowledge Brilliant Parents and Meave and team for having me here. I've been authorised and enrolled today to speak to you about children, young people, and youth culture as a whole. A little bit of a background by way of introduction to myself. I'm originally from northwest London, but was raised in Lewisham, southeast London, for the majority of my teenage years. I was very fortunate at a young age to travel the world extensively as a musician. And we were very successful as musicians. By the age of 21, we'd seen a couple £1 million, and we lost some money, but we'd seen a lot of money, which was great. I then came out of music, and I began to work in a youth offending service. I did that for 10 years, and I really learnt my craft in terms of moving through different roles, understanding theoretically and through practice why children and young adults become involved in offending, but also some of the solutions to prevent them going further. After 10 years in youth offending service, I set up the Liminality Group. Unfortunately, and I'll say this sensitively, some of the children I'd worked with are no longer alive, and some of the children I'd worked with are in custody, in prison, for taking the lives of some of their peers. After a while, I realised there was something more that we needed to do to stem the flow of violence, and I decided to set up the Liminality Group. For the past 10 years, our services have been delivered within prison, so I've worked with over 2,000 boys and girls who are currently in custody. Some have come home and have not gone on to reoffend. Some are doing sentences anything from a year to life in prison, where they will not come home until they're in their 40s and they're under the age of 18, so they've been given significant sentences. There are themes which develop around the lives of boys and girls who become involved in offending, and today is really for me to highlight some of those themes, but also for you to be aware of the things which are not their responsibility. We can't locate this all in just the children. We have to look at our society as well. So, as a discipline, I'm a criminologist, a sociologist, a systemic and psychodynamic practitioner. It basically means that I look at the system around the family, the system around organisations. I understand crime and the solutions to reduce or prevent it. And as a sociologist, I'm concerned with the world around me. When you combine all of those, it comes out and we can do some incredible things. Is that okay? So our main client is the National Health Service, and I know we're streaming, but we'll try and keep as much confidential as possible. We deliver 4 pathways in prisons for boys and girls. One is our bespoke offending behaviour programme, access to employment and education when they come home from custody. One-to-one work with more complex boys and girls, and then training for staff, all right? So, let's push on. I'm going to stand here. You'll be able to see on the screen exactly what we're doing. The aim of today is to give you an overview of some of the contributing factors which start at a very young age for children and families. and then hopefully at the end we'll leave half an hour for you to ask me any questions. Is that okay? All right, so here we go. So I'm the chief executive and founder of the Liminality Group. I will ask you to try and keep this confidential. Again, I know we're streaming, but let's try and remain confidential, especially when we do the questions. If people want to ask confidential questions, let's try and keep that within the room where possible. So context is everything. Once you have worked with 2,000 boys and girls in prisons, you start to see key themes which contribute to their behaviour. And I don't want to start and be lazy by saying kids get involved in gangs. It's too lazy. I don't want to start and say there are some children in schools that are just their behaviour is poor. That's too lazy. We're going to start really early, okay? And we are going to speak to the over-representation of minoritised groups within the prison system. So the majority of children I work with come from Black, Asian and minoritised families. That is not because they are more criminally minded than white families, but the gateway to the criminal justice system, for many of you who will know this, at the gateway, which is the police, there are various reasons as to why those children are stopped, picked up, searched, etc., more than others. So what I'd like to do is start by getting you to think about this. This is a great quote from Desmond Tutu. And he says, there comes a point where we need to stop pulling people out of the river and we need to go upstream and we need to think about why they keep falling in. My aim today is to help you to understand why they keep falling in and what's happening further upstream in the systems. Is that okay? Sorry, no problem. There you are. So my aim today is for us to think about what's happening here and why children and young people seem to get involved in culture that generally can end with them being in custody or them being excluded from school, them taking the lives of their peers. So here's the why, and we're going to start very early. Before children are born, especially children from minoritized communities, there are disparities pre-birth. So for all the children here, before you came through from your mother into the world, there are already challenges that you were met with that were unbeknownst to you. Here's one of the challenges. Minoritized women, this is researched, have found that services during their pregnancy are sometimes not appropriate for them. There are not people that understand language differences. The care sometimes is not given to them. And during the most stressful times before they've given birth, the mother and the child experience systems which are not supportive of them. That's very, very early on. We know that there is a lack of trust sometimes from minoritized communities towards the National Health Service or during the neonatal care pathways. And we also know that babies from Black and minoritized ethnic groups have the highest rate of stillbirths compared to those from other communities. Some of you may be aware that women from African Caribbean backgrounds are 4 times more likely to die during the childbirth period. So again, when we talk about why children become involved in criminality or what the youth culture is, we need to take it away immediately from the lazy language which says kids just join gangs. We're starting from birth. And what we understand is that as they come into their formative years, so this is when children are really learning to walk as toddlers, etc., these children are more likely to face disparities than anybody else. So imagine the stress of giving birth as a mum, being in the hospital, not feeling cared for properly, bringing your child then into the world. They've already started at a disadvantage. Those children then grow up. And when we look at this is the 10 most deprived neighbourhoods by ethnicity in United Kingdom. We find that the Pakistani community are overrepresented. We find that the Bangladeshi community are overrepresented in terms of areas of poverty, of deprivation. We find that mixed white and Black children are overrepresented. We find that Black African children and families are overrepresented around poverty, that Arab children are overrepresented around poverty, and Black Caribbean children are overrepresented with their families in terms of poverty and deprivation. And then finally, Black Caribbean. Now, when it comes to education, the majority of boys and girls that I work with in prison settings have all been excluded from school. I'm going to say that 98% of them have all been excluded from school. That's not just based on their behaviour. Sometimes their behaviour, to safeguard other children, you have to exclude a child. But sometimes some of the barriers to communication mean that the response from the school at times, we call it the threshold, can be lower for children from minoritized communities. So when they do play up, and it's generally for persistent and disruptive behavior, they are more likely to be excluded. Once that child is excluded, they end up in something called a pupil referral unit or an alternative provision. Within those spaces, they meet children who sometimes have intergenerational experiences of criminality. And a child who's been excluded maybe for throwing fireworks or maybe for being persistently disruptive is now around other peers within a pupil referral unit setting and becoming influenced by their knowledge. This is where children become very vulnerable and susceptible to being exploited in various different ways. Everyone following? From an education perspective, and this is the latest data that has come from the Department for Education and from the Youth Justice Board, this is the most current data. When we look at school exclusions nationally, white mixed black children, or white and Caribbean mixed black children, are the highest rate of exclusions. Then Pakistani children, then white or other mixed children, then black African children, and then minor black Caribbean, and finally Gypsy Roma children. So we have to understand that when these children are excluded from school, their timetable is completely different to their peers in a mainstream school. Some of you will be well aware of this. A mainstream school, you will start generally 8:20, 8:30, 8:45, and you will finish maybe about 3:30, 4 o'clock. In a pupil referral unit or an alternative provision, depending on the risk that the child poses to others or their level of vulnerability, they may come in at 10:30 in the morning and leave by 1 p.m. That means they are susceptible to adults within local communities who wait for those children, who do not have structured timetables, but for various reasons cannot go home, and that's where they pick those children up. Okay, we're building a picture here. Now, in terms of health disparities, we know from the NHS that with regards to detentions under the Mental Health Act, per 100,000 people, in 2020, 2021, Black Caribbean, Black African community were overrepresented per 100,000 people in being detained on the Mental Health Act. We can then go down to the mixed community, Asian community, other, and you can see the white community is very, very low. We're painting this picture for you because what we want you to understand is when children become involved in criminality, they are not just pulled into gangs. It has become such a lazy term, and it doesn't have enough of a critical analysis to help us understand what's happening in our systems that contribute to these children, etc., getting involved. Making sense? Now, in terms of the courts, again, an overrepresentation of children and families from minoritized backgrounds in the criminal justice system. So the majority of stop and searches last year, 78% of those between the ages of 10 to 17, so if there's anybody who's 10 years old in this room up to the age of 17, 78% of those stop and searches resulted in no further action. I'd like you to understand the psychological and emotional impact of being a young man or woman on the street, being stopped by the police, being searched, sometimes inappropriately. And I am all for stop and search, by the way, because many of the boys and girls that I work with were walking on the street with weapons that they shouldn't have had, and there's no way to detect them unless we do stop and searches, but they must be led by intelligence, not random. So some of the boys and girls that are stopped, 78% of them, then carry a story for the rest of their lives about how they experienced that stop and search, which came to no further action. Nothing else happened. They then go into their peer group and they have a shared story about how the police treated them on that day. They felt violated, they felt vulnerable, they felt there were no adults in their local community that came to their rescue. And very quickly, that shared story with others who have had the same narrative experience, it becomes something that is built into their DNA. And that's how they start to hate the institution that's supposed to protect them. Again, we're going to talk later about what we can do. But one of the things we must do as parents is equip your children with the knowledge as what to do during a stop and search, what their legal right is, and also give them the ability to come home and tell you what's happened and follow the process all the way through with your local community groups. If something has happened which was inappropriate, or if the stop and search resulted in nothing, you must proceed along that process and get justice in some capacity for your child. Is that okay? The proportion of children who were cautioned or sentenced, especially those from black or minoritized groups, has been increasing over the last decade. But it was higher in the year end March 2011 compared to 10 years ago. When we think about the prison system as a whole, all the boys that I can see in this room, boys are overrepresented within the prison population from the age of 10 to 17. If you're not aware of this, the age of criminal responsibility in the United Kingdom is 10 years old. So if you are 10, you are highly vulnerable and susceptible to older people who may come around you when you're about 9, 9.5, and they may ask you to do things because they know you can't be legally prosecuted. But at the age of 10, you can find yourself in one or two places: a secure children's home, a secure training centre. And these are places, again, where your liberty is taken from you. Parents can visit you, people can come and see you, obviously, but it's a court order which says you must be there for a certain amount of time. The reoffending rate, unfortunately, remains consistently high for children from black and African backgrounds. So I'm going to pause there, because what I'm trying to get you to understand is often when we go and do these talks, people like me stand up and say, kids are joining gangs and it's a terrible thing. And I think that analysis is lazy. I don't think it's done us any good over the years. Because if your child's not involved in a gang, you say, not my child. But we've missed that the systems and structures from the birth canal, unfortunately, disproportionately impact your children in this room. And that means when your child is at school, you have to be so proactive as a parent, not just around their education, but around their peer groups, around what they understand. If the school that they're in is not suitable for them and your child is consistently complaining, you must look at alternatives. Some children may be better schooled within a home environment, some. But it's really important that you listen to the voice of the child and you explore every complaint that your child has. So the question I'd like to ask you, let me show you this one. This is the final slide in terms of disparities. So the child has come through the birth canal, the child's then gone to school, the child is disproportionately impacted in education, health, etc. And then finally, children from minoritized backgrounds are overrepresented in fatalities. So in basic language, children from minoritized backgrounds and men and women from minoritized backgrounds are more likely to be harmed fatally than others. And an interesting fact, after working with 2,000 boys and girls in custody, I'll ask them, why do you harm children that look like you? Because you'll be horrified to hear this, and this is real. They say that if I hurt a child that doesn't look like me, so a child from a different ethnic group, mainly from the white community, I know the sanctions will be significant. I know the criminal justice system will come down on me. But when I harm somebody who looks like me, there's potentially a chance where there will not be a significant consequence from that. And also, through the media, through music, through film, Children from minoritized backgrounds are taught to fear each other. So when they walk past each other on the street, something called preemptive violence takes place, where a peer group is walking towards you, they're of the same ethnicity, the child's anxiety increases because of what the media tells them, what films tell them, what music tell them. And if they are carrying a weapon, they are quicker to pull that weapon out and do something because of the fear they feel. Because the narrative is, if there's a boy or girl that looks like you, they are more likely to harm you. So we have to dispel that myth, and we have to provide a counter narrative to that and say, actually, anybody could harm anybody. It's not just about ethnicity. Okay. I'd like to ask you in the room, anybody, how do you feel after hearing all of that information about disparities? How do you feel? Sad, thank you for sharing. How else do you feel?
I mean, the feeling was there, but now increased.
Good, thank you. Anybody else, how do you feel? Yes, sir.
I've that idea long time, but now I see it is real.
Absolutely. It's really easy to have the idea and sit around our dinner tables at home with our peers and say, I think something's wrong. But when the data is presented in this way, and normally when we go and do talks for corporations, we go a lot more in depth with data. Data is very important. Your interpretation of data helps you to find a story beneath the numbers. Anybody else, how do you feel?
About this, just a system that's, if the person say the same color, might be not much harm.
Yeah.
As if I do the other one, I mean, like, you know,
Yeah.
they believe that that will not be fair
Yeah.
if I the same.
Yes.
thing. So the justice system is not being not doing the same thing
For everybody, it's not fair within the system.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
Must be the media coverage as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And remember, we're talking about children, all right? Anybody else, how do you feel? Yes, sir.
Angry.
Angry, good. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Yes, sir.
It's all gone on for so long
Yeah.
without any solution.
Yes, thank you. And we're going to talk about some of those solutions here today in terms of your families. I'm not going to speak on behalf of the government, but I'm going to speak on behalf of some of the antidote to the virus, and it is a virus. Yes, sir.
It's very sad and it's not surprising.
Yeah.
We want to go upstream and try and get to the cause.
Perfect. Perfect. We want to go upstream and get towards the cause. Anybody else? How are you feeling? Yes, sir.
I think we've been conditioned into believing certain narrative.
Yes.
So I think when you put it the way you put it,
Yes.
and analyze, then it brings home the awareness we've been on the wrong track. And listening to children, how trivial it may be, is so important.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about that. Communication with your children is so important. Okay, I'm going to move on just for time reasons. And what I'd like to do, I'd like to introduce you to this concept. Some of you in the room will be aware of it, but I want you to really have a listen. The concept of adverse childhood experiences has been within our discipline and within our work for decades. But when we coin terms, it helps people to understand. Now, I'm going to be very careful here because every single person in this room has experienced various childhood experiences, all of us. But there are some childhood experiences that have a significant detrimental impact and contribute to an increase of children appearing in custodial institutions, in prisons. Now, some of those adverse childhood experiences, one is poverty. One could be witnessing experiences in the home, arguments between parents, various types of abuse, psychological, emotional, physical, etc. Having a parent or a sibling who's in custody. So if you have a brother or sister who's in jail and you have to go and visit them, that's an adverse experience on you as a child. School exclusion, we've spoken about that. And some of the things which happen within our communities, and when I use the word our communities, I'm talking about every ethnic group. There are things we're willing to discuss, and there are things sometimes that we keep quiet. And some of those things have a detrimental impact on your children within the home, because it then plays out in their behavior. So if a child has had 4 or more of those adverse experiences that I've just shared with you, they are significantly more likely to be in prison as an adult. significantly. So what that means is if we are in the home and we are having disagreements as parents, we have to find a way to resolve that in front of our children in a way where we repair the harm. Parents are allowed to argue, that's just part of growing. But when we cause a rupture that can involve physical arguments, it has a deafening or a deepening psychological impact on those children. There are various forms of emotional, psychological and physical experiences and abuse that can take place again in our communities, and we must be aware. Spaces like this, pathways like this, are where you speak to people that you can trust within your communities and you find solutions. If you do not, your children are more at risk in the community of being pulled into things. I don't want to spend time at home. Why? Because my mum and dad are always arguing. So where am I going to be? In the local park. Then I meet other children with same narratives and all of a sudden I've gone off. Making sense? So those are some adverse childhood experiences. As I said, if a child has experienced 4 or more of those, they are more likely to end up in the prison system as adults. Now I want to introduce you to a couple of more concepts. Some of you may have heard of these and some of you may not. But I want to talk about this process called adultification. Now you just take the word adult, and it's basically a process where you can see here that girls, in particular, and boys, but girls, are made to, they're made to bypass their childhood, and systems and people respond to them in a negative way. I'll give you a prime example of this, and I'm going to read through this because this is the real definition of the bias, okay? So it's a stereotype specifically which impacts Caribbean boys and African boys and girls, but minoritized communities as well, where they are deemed to be less innocent and more adult-like than their peers. In other words, they are not assessed based on their maturity, but they're based upon assessed based upon their individual behavior. And it is presumed that they are older than their age, and it is presumed they then need responses from the systems which are age inappropriate. Black and minoritized girls, specifically, historically, have been the recipients of unwanted attention, and they've been victims of horrific treatment in some cases. I'm treading carefully because we have young children in the room. Now, in terms of femininity in mainstream culture, what happens to young girls from minoritized communities, especially young black girls, is they're made out to be stereotypically angry, stereotypically violent, and there is a blurring between a distinction between their adulthood and their childhood. Now, many of these assumptions come from the early 20th century in film, in music. And what it means is that we have scenarios where some of you may be aware last year, the child queue experience that we had within our local communities, where a child was inappropriately searched within school and she was a young girl. That can only happen when we have systems that bypass the childhood of children. If you see a group of boys on the street, and some of them, because of the food they consume, it was different in our era, right? So some of the food they consume, they are physically bigger than their age. They may be 13 years old, but their physical presence makes them look like they're 17 or 18. They still deserve for the system to respond to them as a child and not to their physicality. In terms of the adultification of girls, we use developmentally inappropriate approaches to their education and their behavior. Oh, she doesn't want to learn. She doesn't care. She's always rude. She's always angry. Rather than exploring what could actually be taking place for her within her home, within her context. And again, when we think about minoritized boys and girls, there is another concept, and we call this socialized adultification. What it basically means is some children who live within socially disorganized communities, so communities where there's extreme levels of poverty, these children become the receptors for the distress of their parents. So when their parents at times may not be able to pay for things within the home, or when their parents are experiencing emotional, psychological challenges, children in impoverished environments or children in urban environments become the adult carers for their own parents. And they hold all of the secrets within the home. And it eats away at them emotionally and psychologically. They then go to school and somebody will say, what's wrong? And to protect the secrets within the family, they will hold it in. But then it comes out in behaviour when they throw a chair, when they push over a table, when they fight a peer, because they're expressing the distress they have within them. Now, when we think about the adultification of boys, it's very similar, but this is a great image. It says, when do I become a threat? As a young baby, you're cute. As a young adolescent, still quite cute. And then something happens to boys, especially boys from minoritized communities, where they become seen as a threat. It's so important that you speak to your boys and girls about how they manage themselves in local communities, how they dress, how they talk, how they walk. It's okay to be part of your peer groups. We all had language as kids. But they also have to be taught how to defend and protect themselves in spaces. And I don't mean physically, but I mean how to articulate themselves to institutions. How to walk into a shop and speak correctly to get the response that you need. How to find somebody in your community when you need support. Because when we don't do that, they are adultified. They're not seen as children, they're seen as adults. Any questions on the adultification? Any thoughts? Has anybody ever heard of this concept before? Yes. Good. Yeah.
Parents now want to become friends with children, so they may not challenge them of how they talk and how they dress.
Yes.
Whereas decades ago we were told you can't wear that dress.
Yes.
Because you're not an adult, you're
Yeah.
a child.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're 15, you can't wear that. And I think parents are somehow frightened now to say that, so that kind of adds to it. So it's like parenting of coming back to the age of your child and what's appropriate, so they
Yeah.
don't fall into this.
And so it's not the children don't do it themselves, it's what the systems project onto the children. But what you do need to do as a parent, absolutely, is talk about how you're presenting and representing yourself in local communities. You know, there are children from specific faith groups that we work with who struggle with the modernization of placing themselves in local communities. The pull from local communities to walk away from the path that they're supposed to be in. That is a real pull and generally contributes sometimes to behaviour increasing in a negative way. And you have to reaffirm to your child as much as you can that their faith, their beliefs are so important, especially in local contexts where other belief systems may try to pull children away. And that's not just here, that's across all faith groups that we work within. Does that make sense? So, here's a group task for you. And we're just going to move on slowly. I'm aware of the time. We want to leave you half an hour for any questions. Are you taking something from this, by the way? You sure? There's a lot of silence. Great. Here's a group task. I'd like you all to have a look at this picture on the screen, and I'd like you to tell me what you think happened. Anyone can just shout out. What do you think's happened? A crime has happened, yeah? Anybody else? What do you think's happened?
I think it's a serious crime.
A serious crime, thank you. What gives you that indication, sir?
Because of what's on there, the police car and then all the ribbons going across,
Yep.
cordoning off the whole thing.
Yes.
It's a serious crime of some nature.
Thank you. Go ahead, young man.
If it was a serious crime, wouldn't there be more police cars?
Interesting. Thank you for that. Anybody else? What do you think's taken place?
A fatality.
A fatality. How do you know that, sir?
Because of the clothes that's left in place.
Great. I'm showing you this image very quickly because as parents and adults in your local communities, I want you to be aware of what your children may pass sometimes on the way to school that they'll never tell you about. Now, we know this is a fatality because the police use two colours of tape for different incidents. Blue is when there's been an incident, but red is where there's been a fatal incident. We also know that clothes were cut off of the victim or the perpetrator. We also know that this car here is not just a police car, it's a marked car. It's a firearms unit because the yellow dots on the screen tell us this is a firearms unit. So the analysis of the picture lets you know that the police car is within the cordon, so they may have discharged their firearm towards this person And this is what has happened in the local area. Now, I'm giving you that because when we think about youth culture, as a parent, if you're unaware of what an image like that is, then you're a little bit behind in what your children may experience in local communities. Because they may have to walk to primary school or secondary school and pass that in the morning. And their friends say, yeah, somebody was killed last night. And the child doesn't come home to tell you that, but they carry that internally. It increases their fear and their anxiety. And within the coming days, there may be a shrine if somebody's been killed. And your children can be experiencing that on a daily basis and repeating that traumatic experience going to and from school. I'm not asking you to be a police officer, I'm not asking you to be a criminologist, this is our field, but I am asking you to have more awareness of the types of things which happen in our local communities that many of our children carry. Okay. Now, communication. And in the last half an hour, I really want you to ask as many questions as you can, but communication is the key. I would say that this gentleman looks very angry with his son, but communication, or confused, but communication is the key. Do not communicate with your child from your position, communicate with your child from their experiences. Do not communicate with your child from your position. Well, back in my day, well, when we were growing up, honestly, that narrative is not helpful for a child. Tell me what you're experiencing. Tell me who's around you. No names. I don't want the names of children. But what have you seen? What have you heard? What are the things that make you feel unsettled? I want to live in your world in this conversation, and I want to know what's happening for you. Then I can use my adult mind and I can help to safeguard you. But let me start from a position of what's happening for you, because respectfully, the 70s, 80s, 90s are completely different, and the 2000s are completely different to what this generation is experiencing now. So start from a position of what's going on for you. Let me listen, let me not judge. My friend has a load of cannabis in his house. Oh my God, let's call the police. No, just listen, just listen. I've got a friend who carries a weapon. Just listen. No alarmist movements, just listen. And if you don't have the capacity to respond, come here, speak with the elders, speak with men and women in your space and get them to support. You know, within all of these spaces, you have criminologists, psychologists, social workers. We said it earlier, you have all of these specialist people around you. If you can't do it as a parent, bring your concerns in, manage the intelligence carefully, but do what you can to support your child. So communication is key in all areas. You're excluded from school for the day. What happened? They said you threw a chair. There's more to the story. What's the context? Why did you throw the chair? Well, to be honest, that teacher has been da-da-da-da for a couple of weeks. Or to be honest, I've been bullied for a couple of weeks and I didn't know what else to do. Just what's the context? Okay, I'd like to quickly take you through the stratification of street gangs within the United Kingdom. Now, we've shown this to over 2,000 boys and girls in custody from the age of 15 to 25. And they've all told us that this is right. So if you're watching by live stream, if you're sitting here looking at this, please don't think in your mind, that's not how it goes. Because most of the men and women that we work with in custody have all said, that's exactly how it starts. So here we go. When we were growing up, I'll just do it for a second, we had the oldest and the youngest. And we were very fortunate that if you were good at maths or good at English or good at sport, the older lot who were involved in crime, they may actually say, do you know what, just stay, do what you're doing. However, the pool now for this generation far exceeds what we had. Can somebody tell me how much they think the drug economy in the United Kingdom is worth? It's going to be more than 500, it's more than 500 million, I'll give you that. Give me a figure what you think is spent by consumers on drugs in the United Kingdom per annum. It's more than 500 million. Somebody give me a figure.
2 billion.
2 billion, anybody else? 3 billion, anybody else?
5 billion.
Amazing, 9.4 billion per annum. Is spent on cannabis, amphetamines, cocaine, heroin, etc. You then have to think about your child or your family or people in your local area who respectfully, financially, may be really just getting by. And then somebody within their peer group says, I can help you make a little bit of money. And then we go, why they get involved in drug dealing all over the place? The terminology county lines is very new. 20 plus years ago, we were talking about people just going to OT or just being out in the countryside selling drugs. It's been happening for decades, it's not new. But what you must understand is when there is a 9.4 billion economy, this is way beyond a child locally selling a few wraps of drugs. That's the exploitative part. Because the men and women who sit in countries that actually produce these drugs are very wealthy individuals. They are involved in what we call organised crime. I can speak like this because we want to prevent children getting caught up. So, when we think about the stratification of street gangs, this is what it looks like. You have your youngers and your young Gs. These are children in primary school going into secondary school. They're in their local areas, local communities. They come into the radar of the police sometimes. They may be misbehaving within school. They may be having extended periods outside of the home, coming home at 10:30, 11 at night, which is not appropriate for somebody who's in the age of 9 to 12. And when they're in this group here, they are looking for somebody to replace some deficiencies, sometimes within the home or within their life experience. Once they've established themselves at this level, and it's very entrepreneurial. Some of the children in this room may know kids in school who sell chocolates and, donuts and, sweets. And I love it. It's very entrepreneurial. But for some, especially a lot of the men and women we work with in prisons, it's become a gateway. They started that way and then they migrated very quickly upwards. Now, once you're here and you've solidified yourself in this place, you can get to this place here where you become what we call verified. Now, once you're verified, you have to verify yourself in some ways. You guys know about Twitter, when you see the verification, the blue tick, or Instagram? Well, the streets have verification as well. You get verified through being good with violence, through having intergenerational family connections, for being good with making money, or for doing things that other people won't do. Once you're verified, you can choose yourself a younger. At this verification level, it's not all exploitative. Sometimes you have people who replace the services, statutory services, that do not kick in time for children when they're in their most vulnerable positions. So if I need to see a social worker, but I don't meet the threshold, there's a community social worker that will look after me. He or she's just a guy around the way. They'll let me come and stay on their sofa. They might purchase food for me. They might make sure my school clothes are neat, new shirts, because my family can't support. And they take me under their wing. It's not always exploitative. It's done with love, sometimes distorted, but it is not always exploitative. The next level up are your elders. Again, I work with many of them, and they allow us to do this and speak about this because they know that it helps children from getting involved at a younger stage. Your elders generally can be the 18 to 25 age group, although you can have elders who are much younger based upon what they've done, who their family connections are, etc. And the older guys and girls control what happens at these lower phases. And they can control the firearms, the drugs, etc. Now, the older lot don't like noise because noise gets in the way of their money. So they will choose somebody who's verified. There's a misconception that children who are really dedicated academically, they come home, they're respectful to their parents, they dress well, that they don't get involved. These are the children that fly under the radar. Because a child is turning up to school every time, because a child is respectful to their parents, because a child, is not bringing certain items home, keep your antennas on. Because the older lot look for individual children who are very switched on. You don't want the noise. It disrupts the cash flow. And then finally, we have our elders. We call these mythological figures. They very rarely come into the community, but when they do, you know who they are. Men and women, they'll come once in a while. They'll turn up in a lovely vehicle, looking very nice, but they'll only come for certain events. Funeral, christening, birthday, or any key cultural events. And you'll hear the younger lot whispering, "Oh, that's Michael. Oh, that's Sally. She jumped out of a window and survived. I can hear somebody saying hello. Can anyone hear that? It's fine. So when we speak to the stratification of UK gangs, I want you to be aware. I want you to be aware that it is very lazy to just talk about gangs. It's far more stratified than that. All right, finally, last 2 slides, and then we'll open up for conversation. Identity. Many of the boys, specifically that we work with, have 2 identities, sometimes multiple identities. They have the identity within their home. That's the one that turns up for all of the religious or faith-based events. That's the one that will go upstairs and get mum a tea. That's the one that speaks properly in the home. That's the one that will help with washing and cooking. And then you will have the other identity within that individual who can go out and do the things on the streets that we just cannot dream of. The boys and girls that we work with, again, a majority boys, when we speak to them about the crime they've been involved in, we help them to understand that generally it was committed by the other side of their identity, which has been influenced by local communities, peers, etc. But the person that pays the price for it is their birth identity. And it's a mind-blowing moment. Because when you switch on the news, everybody here, and you hear about a child that's been fatally harmed, and they sensationalize it, you'll look at your TV and go, I can't believe the children are doing this. And I'm telling you that these children, out of 10, 9 of them didn't mean to kill somebody. 9 of them. They're involved in something, an altercation, a weapon was there, and it was used in a way to either prevent or to harm, but not to fatally take somebody. So when you then speak to them, you speak to their identity, their birth identity, the person who was born to the mother and the father, who pays the price for the street identity that they created. And now they've got 18 years to sit down and think about that. So there's a lot of work that should be done again within the home, within family groups, about identity. Who are you? What do you want to become? What interests you? If they're playing music upstairs and you don't know it, please don't go turn it down. Go and sit down and learn. It's part of their culture. It's part of youth culture. Learn, and then we can have a discussion about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. But when we push children away and when we put really tight boundaries around our families, they seek out understanding in other places, and sometimes it is distorted. We think about this concept of the transmission of intergenerational trauma, and I'm going to be very quick on this because I want to open up the floor. In all of our families, going right back to the turn of the 20th century and even further back, we all carry different traumas. And unconsciously or consciously, we place those on our children as they go through generations. Be aware of how you were raised, what you saw, what you experienced, and what you sometimes unintentionally project onto your own children, which prevents them from being free sometimes, stifles their creativity sometimes. Sometimes in terms of this intergenerational passing, it means that children and families are very suspicious of statutory services. So here's a grandparent. Don't trust social workers, don't trust the schools, don't trust the police. They communicate that to their children. Don't trust, don't trust. The children communicate it to their children, and it keeps going on and keeps going on. But if you don't trust, sometimes you can't get the support that you need. So we have to be mindful of how we transmit our own experiences of trauma into our own children and prevent them from having clear spaces where they can be honest with us and have dialogue. Okay. I am going to end on this and give you some time. So context is everything. All I wanted to do today was give you a whirlwind. We normally do this for a whole day or 2 days. But today was a whirlwind, just to say, let's not be lazy and locate all of this in children. It starts from the birth canal. Children from minoritized communities especially are disproportionately overrepresented in mental health, in poverty, in poor education outcomes, criminal justice system, etc. As they grow, they need spaces where they can communicate, because as they walk down the street, other adults adultify them. They place onto them that you're not really 15, because you've got a bit of hair on your beard. I think you're about 19, 20. No, I'm 15 years old. And I deserve to be supported as a 15-year-old child. Not because you see hair on my beard, or not because of my physical stature, you want to treat me as an adult. I'm still a child. So please use age-appropriate responses to me as a child. If I'm showing you distress, treat me as a distressed child and not an adult. Context is everything. I'll stop there. Any questions? Useful is a lot of information. Can I ask any of the children under 18, have you found that useful? He's like, yeah. You found it useful? Some of the stuff that I was talking about, is it relevant to what happens in youth culture? I'm not far off, right? And I'm 44. Did you find it useful, young man? Good. Did you find it useful? Good. Right, any questions from any parents or anybody in the room?
Can I take that?
Of course. No pressure, but any questions, we can answer them as a room.
Thank you, that was really great and really informative. I just wanted to know, in terms of the police, Crown prosecution, judges, what you've just presented to us,
yes.
Do they get that?
Yeah.
Because we can go off now. I work in early years, so this is really grassroots for me. We'll do this, all this work, schools may do it, teachers. What about the other side?
Yeah.
Because if they're not educated, it's the same situation that's just going to continue.
Thank you. So yes, they are educated. Over the past 10, 15 years, some of my colleagues and I, there we go. Over the past 10 or 15 years, some of my colleagues and I have been working with magistrates and Crown judges. It's a slow process because, the systems, the legislation, it's hundreds of years old. So you cannot have a day's conference and people walk out going, I get it. It's embedded within the DNA of the way people are taught academically and their responses in terms of class system that they may come from. And that's not based on ethnicity, it's just class, academia, etc. So yes, we do work with all the institutions around what we've spoken about to help them to think about the context that families come from. I do work with a lot of young white families. I don't want to project all of this into minoritized communities. We work with young white families who, again, intergenerationally have had experiences, or, families, these are the shocking ones. Families from all communities where their dad's a lawyer, their mum's a doctor, the house is worth 1.5, and the child has still come through the criminal justice system for something really serious. And everybody's sitting there going, how has this happened? Because youth culture is dominant, regardless of your class, regardless financially where you are. If you don't have a hold on your children and have open dialogue and communication, they can still be brought in. So in response to your question, yes, we do training all over the place to make sure they have an understanding, but it's going to take years because it's embedded. Yes.
Just the government can track down on the suppliers, like as you just mentioned, the one who provides all these things. I know it's going to be a very difficult question because that's what they same like alcohol and all that.
It's a great question. And I'm going to be careful because we are live streaming and I want to keep my career. But when you've got an economy that's worth 9.4 billion, it's hard to curtail that, Same with alcohol, tobacco. It's hard to curtail that.
Does that mean everybody's involved?
I didn't say that, no. No. But when we have children who are found with maybe 20 or 30,000 pounds under their bed, that's nothing compared to somebody who's holding 25, 30 million. If you've got 30 million, you can't just walk to your bank. That means you've got somebody very senior somewhere that's helping you to, and all we do in terms of children is help them to understand the exploitation is, you think 30,000 can do something for you. Yes, you can have some nights out, yes, some nice clothes, but you can't purchase a home. You can't walk anywhere with 30 grand and get a deposit on a home. You know, you may be able to start a business, and if you're smart, you can use that money, but there's somebody further up the chain that's holding 20, 30, 40 million, 100 million, and they're not going to do the time in jail that you will. So, you know, we always use this analogy that if you look at the lifespan of a child in custody who may do 15 or 20 years for a murder, and you look at that 15 or 20 years working in a very low-skilled job, you would have amassed more than what you were arrested with. It's just basic prison economics. You got 30 grand got taken off of you, 15 or 20 years, you could be making 25, 30K per annum over that period of time. Yes. Thank you.
This question is from Kadra. Why are young ethnic kids easy target for gangs, and how can parents help their kids? Why is there an increase of young girls used these days?
Okay. So in a London context and in urbanised communities, minoritized children are overrepresented. But if we go up further up the motorway to north, it was not minoritized children. There are white children who are just as involved. So I think some of the reasons why these children are more susceptible, it goes back to the concept of identity, them finding their space within a British landscape, them being more easily exploited because of systems that don't jump to their needs, that don't contextualize their distress. And some of those things just make those children more susceptible. When children are trying to find their way in a British society of all ethnic groups, it can be very challenging. But your peer groups sometimes, and let's not be lazy, it's not just a sense of belonging. Your peer groups can provide the comfort and safety and understanding that sometimes your own parents cannot. And that's where some people get pulled in. Now, in terms of girls have always been involved. But when we look at child sexual exploitation, or when we look at the increase of children, you know, recently girls fatally being wounded, it shines a light onto what's happening with girls. Girls have always been involved. And girls, as women, they're always positioned as the vulnerable individual. There are women who are proactive. There's always been a female boss of, you know, organised families. Matriarchs, generally, are very powerful individuals. And in a criminal context, girls have been just as active, because generally with boys, why do they want money? To impress the girls. So if we can get into the psychology of the girls, which people do, and we can say your expectations for a partner in the future should be way higher than somebody who can just take you out for dinner. Should be way higher. Go ahead, sir.
Sorry, sir. She was up first.
Hi, I would like to, just understand, does the system understand or aware of youth culture? And if they are, or if they aren't, can we educate them from your perspective?
So I'll just shout. So, oh no, because people are online. Sorry.
Yeah, people
so I think, so I think the system is definitely aware. But I'll give you a quick insight. Last week I was training some people in the system who are very influential in managing a specific part of the system in relation to children. And when I showed them the data, some of the data that they produced themselves, they hadn't seen what we were evidencing to them, because they were viewing the data in a different way to what we were. We view the data in the context of 2,000-3,000 children we've worked with in custody, thousands more in the community. Being an African Caribbean male myself, growing up in a London context, it just means that the way we view the data, it brings something different. So our role, part of our role as an organisation, is to go into these spaces and say, this is what's actually happening. It doesn't start from when they're 12. It starts from pre-birth. It starts from how their mothers are treated in hospital during the pregnancy. It starts from what's gone on intergenerationally, from before they came to United Kingdom. Some families, they bring their own experiences of systems. It starts from there, and then that is then projected into the children, etc., etc., etc. So we're helping them to understand, There's a willingness to understand, but it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of support and time. So I think if you put it more in the context of your own families, I don't want you to leave today feeling overwhelmed, like there's nothing you can do. What you can do is be really focused about what you're doing with your own children, what you're doing with your own families, where your support systems come from, spaces like this. Don't be afraid to share. Don't be embarrassed if your children are getting involved in things. Do not be embarrassed. Talk to people and create open dialogue where your child can be extremely honest with you and say, this is what I've seen, this is what I've done, this is what I've been around, I need help.
My question is basically, recently there's been a couple of arrests, as you may, the whole world knows anyway. There's some brothers that got arrested, etc. Why is it that a lot of the youngsters are very, they were quite attracted to that kind of portrayal of human beings? If you can give me a quick answer to that. Thank you.
Okay, so a quick answer, it's exciting. It's glamorous, but it's exciting. So you're going to take your mum and dad in the home. They work all the hours that they are given. They just about have money to get a holiday per year. They stress when bills come. There's tension within the space because we're just trying to get by. And even if you're financially stable, still there's always a bill that can come and knock you for six, right? So those children see all of this. And then we talk about, the hyper-commercialization of our world now. When we were growing up, I hate doing it, but I am going to do it. The people who had extreme wealth on television were just, movie stars. We didn't know about the specific things, the type of car, the type of jewelry, the type of clothing, the shop to go to. But what's happened is all of these spaces over the past 20 plus years have been courting, and I use that word deliberately, they've been courting young people and adults, young adults, who make money fast, and then they're able to experience social mobility by going into restaurants that generally they would never be welcomed into. But because now they have that cash, those doors open. So the child goes home and sees their own parents struggling, but they turn over there and they see people in their peers and older people who are having amazing holidays, the best lifestyle, and they go, I want a taste of that. And that's just it. There's so much more that goes around the psychology of it, but a lot of this is rooted in poverty. How am I ever going to, if you're in a family and we're still trying to own our own home, and that's gone on intergenerationally. There are children who have hired hotels. They're 15 years old. They've hired a hotel worth £500 for the night. You would never know. They've driven some of the best cars, hired them. The older guys have helped them into these cars. You would never know. They go into some very well-known clothes shops, very, very well-known clothes shops, and they are treated like royalty. And it's really difficult to provide a counter-narrative to that. Now, we are all about developing entrepreneurialism, so I think you can have those things if you work extremely hard for it, but if you want it overnight, it's going to go really quickly as well. But I can't paint them if it's exciting. It really is exciting. To stand next to somebody from your area that's got a 200 grand watch on, it's very exciting. It's very exciting.
Questions from online. Yeah. Rachel would like to know, where can young people go for support if they feel pressured into joining a gang?
Oh, goodness, well. You start immediately within your home if you can, to speak to your families. If you can't, we're looking at teachers within your school that are trusted. We're looking at your next group within faith groups, local communities, people that are doing positive things that you can share information with. If you are being pressured and you feel you're at risk, you do need to call the police. You can do it anonymously. You do need to do that. But you need to speak to adults. Now, the pressures in a gang, again, we can be lazy with this. People don't just get up in the morning and say, you're going to join this. That's, that happens, but it's more the slow drip feeding. It's children that live in areas, and from the age of 5 or 6, when they're playing football, there are older individuals that see them, and they may see discord within the family. Just little things that show them this child is not being supervised in the right way. And very slowly, from age 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, by the time they walk into secondary school, I know your family set up, you're prime, let's talk.
Kadra says, thank you for the first question. And then the question now is, what advice would you give parents to help their kids born here who... One second.
Okay.
What advice would you give parents to help their kids born here who are between two worlds and don't feel like they can be themselves at home?
Yeah, see, that's a great question. Thank you. Again, there is something about the culture that some of our elders hold and the clash that it has with Western or London-centric or urbanised environments thinking. The old days are not as relevant as what's going on now. The morals and values are definitely respect your elders, stand up straight, if you go to a job interview, speak properly, manage your money, all of those things, please keep bringing. But the context has changed, the landscape has changed. In your child's hand, they have access to devices that can give them access to a global space within minutes. Something happens and within seconds they're watching it and they'll never tell you what they've seen. So I think there is a tension culturally, and I think that contributes to a lot of minoritized communities having challenges within education and the criminal justice system, because parents are sometimes they're not spending enough time to understand what's going on in the culture. You may be from an African Caribbean background, but your friends may be white British, they may be from a Jewish community, they may be from a South Asian community, and all of these influences come into you as a child. You then come home and you're trying to find your identity in your home, and there's just a clash. And what we have to try and do is we try and centre young men and girls and help them understand this is where you naturally come from. This is who you are. But you've also been influenced by a Western space, and also in a more primitive way by your local area. There are children in this area that can walk and talk differently to children in another area just over there. Just the way they wear their trousers. Just the way they connect, just the way they bond. So all of those things as parents, you have to do your homework. It's incumbent upon you as a parent, not just to provide, financially, but you have to understand what's going on, spend time online, look at what's going on, look at how the landscape is changing so you can support your child in a more effective way. And if you don't know what to do, get help outside. We're not all supposed to know what to do. But in all your areas, there are boxing gyms, there are football spaces, there are, specific people who are mentors in those areas. They're all there. You have to plug into them. Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask you a question on that very point. What do you see as the role of youth services, and from your experience, the cuts that have been suffered by youth services in the last decade? Have you seen evidence that the negative effects of that?
Oh, yes.
I mean, common sense says that would be the case, but have you actually got evidence that you could give us of how that has had a bad effect?
Yep. So, again, we didn't have enough time to do this today, but we know that thousands of youth centres were closed. And we know that a whole generation of youth workers were taken out of role. But if we go back to what I call the defining moments, the 2008 crash, the austerity measures, the London and national riots in 2011, to where we are now, we lost an entire generation. Because what you need are spaces where even if 4 children walk in this afternoon into a youth centre, that's just as valid as having 100. So youth services are crucial to local areas. There should be spaces that children can go to 9 till 10 p.m. at night where they're fed, where they get to do activities. They should be taken away. Our organisation does this, but take them away in non-term time, half-term, summer holidays. Give their parents a break, take them out of London, take them to the countryside, let them breathe, let them see a different way of life. But when we sucked the money out of those spaces, all of that was ripped away. And those children became really vulnerable to just being in their local areas. So this is what we're seeing now is a direct effect of us pulling money out, exposing children to too many unhealthy appetites visually, among other things. But if you remove the money, you're going to have a generation that grows up without the support. Any other questions? Okay. Do you want to take it? I'm aware of time, but I'm happy to go on, but I'm aware of time for you all as well.
It's just a question about your service. How does your service work? Is it by referrals, or like you individual referrals or organization referrals? It's just.
Thank you. So I'll be completely honest. Our service, we are positioned higher than working with individual children, because we are commissioned by, statutory services to work with sometimes groups of 20, 30 children, etc. So we'll work with 100 children per year in custody alone. And then, we'll go into schools specifically and work with 10 or 15 children who are most at risk of being excluded. I'll always say to you, in your local area, you should look at your services first, because you have men and women here in your local youth, mentor organisations, sports organisations like we spoke about earlier, that can do that immediate work. Yeah, so I would always advise you to do that first. Our services are based in, nationally, but mainly the London and the Kent areas. And we specialise in the early intervention prevention work in schools that we've had partnerships with for many years, and then mainly work with children who commit some of the most serious offences. So I would always go local first, And here, again, when I talk to faith groups, I always say you have access to resources within your own buildings. So there can be somebody within here who, who's interested in setting up their own football club for kids. And what they need is the space to come together and say, right, we're going to fund you to do your course, and then we're going to hire a football pitch every Tuesday night from 5 until 7, and we're going to pay for it here, and then we're going to feed the kids as well. But it comes from in here. We mustn't always look externally to find resources. Sometimes I talk at churches, there can be 700, 800 people in a room. And I just say, if everybody just took £10 out, just now, and we just committed to £10 every couple of months, you could create your own youth service.
Sorry. No problem. So I was just saying that pretty much what you've just said now, we've got something going on here anyway. So every Saturday night we've got our young group of people. The services, they're the ones that actually, we're only facilitating. They are the organisers of everything.
Right.
And so it's empowering them as well to a sense of responsibility, a sense of accountability as well. And so we do have that. They actually come here to play football.
Amazing.
In the centre.
There you go.
Yeah, and then we've got a table tennis and etc. I don't think it's working yet, but hopefully is it working? Yeah. So basically, we do have those services that we provide.
Good.
And obviously, we're looking at other activities. Pretty much what you said, to take young people out from here, take them away during the summer holidays, during the Easter holidays, etc. For camps, to different areas, maybe in the woods somewhere, with different activities, especially physical activities, because their fingers are quite strong, but the minds.
Right,
yeah. Thank you.
No, perfect.
Have a question?
Is there a
I have a
question?
question.
So, would you say that, you have certain adults and they're trying to assimilate into, this kind of the groups, children and whatnot, and that's by adopting their language and adopting their behaviour. Would you say that this is an effective way to, counter crime, for example, by, speaking the way they speak, walking the way they walk and whatnot? So would you say that's something that's effective, or should we rather, enforce certain discipline within these groups and tell them that, no, this is the correct way, and what you're doing is wrong, and the way you're speaking is wrong?
Amazing. Great question. Great question.
Yeah, good one.
So, I think you want to teach children and young people to be chameleons. You cannot have them go to spaces where language is spoken and they stand out because they don't understand the vernacular. They need to be able to maneuver in any space they go to, but they also need to understand, when you go for a job interview, this is how you speak. When you go to a shop, this is how you speak. You can still call him boss man, but there's other ways. Do you know what I mean? So I think for adults coming into those spaces who want to connect, if it's real to you, then that's all good, because they will know you're being real. But don't try and fake something. Sometimes adults or children will say to us, "You speak this way, you speak so well." And then we'll go, "Yeah, but we can still do the other side. But do you want that side to represent you in a professional meeting, or do you want this side to represent you?" And they go, "No, I want this side." So chameleons, teach them to be chameleons. In your local peer groups, have the lingo, do that. So wherever you are, you can manage yourself and you can safeguard yourself, but also know how to correctly speak, present yourself properly in the right spaces. Is that cool? Cool.
Thank you.
Okay.
Was there any more questions?
No? Amazing. Thank you.
Wasn't that amazing? My goodness, please give Andrea a round of applause. Absolutely amazing. There was so much there, so many nuggets. One of the things that I wrote down just a few notes, and one of the things Andrez said was, if I harm a white person, there may be a harder sanction than if I harm a black person. And that, my heart sank, because it's about how do we see ourselves, how do we value ourselves. So that was a real, I had to really listen to it to understand what he was saying. Also, he talked about communicating from the child's experiences as opposed to ourselves. So their perspective, I think oftentimes as parents, we think about ourselves and we forget that we were young once. Yeah, and it's all about, respecting us and doing as we say, etc., etc. So understanding that what they're going through and putting ourselves in their shoes. He spoke about unintentionally projecting our stuff on our children. So really, I think this is about, and we always talk about brilliant parents having the courage to self-reflect, the courage to self-interrogate, how am I engaging with my child, with my teenager? Is it the right way? Or am I doing am I parenting the way that I was parented, which doesn't always work in the context that Andre spoke about. So I think as parents, and there are many parents here today, it is about the relationship. Everything boils down to the relationship that we have with our children. If we can build firm roots and a firm foundation with our children, they're far less likely to go and look for the love elsewhere and the comfort elsewhere, because they'll have it at home. And how do we help them to navigate? And sometimes we need to look at ourselves so that we can do that in the best possible way. So again, some real nuggets there, Andre. I can't thank you enough. Yes, indeed. Another round of applause, I think. Absolutely. And thank you all to those that are watching virtually. A couple of things I want to bring to your attention in terms of brilliant parents. Tomorrow we have a seminar entitled Raising Competent Teenagers, and that's about how can we support our teenagers in the school setting, and that'll be delivered remotely by yours truly, moi, tomorrow. So, do go online and you will see the details there, Raising Competent Teenagers. We also have a program for parents. You may know some parents who are perhaps going through challenges at home. Maybe they're separated or going through divorce, and we provide support for those parents. So if you know anyone, it's called the Parenting Apart program, that you think could parent better if they co-parented together, then again, there's a leaflet on your chair about that. We're also going to ask in a couple of minutes if there's anybody that would like to just tell us all about how you thought about today, and we will video you. We'd like to put you on our social media. So it'd be lovely to get a young person's perspective on what they've thought today and a parent's perspective, so we can put that on our social media, because I think it's really important that we help other parents. I'm really thankful that Hillingdon Council are as passionate about parenting as we are. I've worked in the borough for the last 10 years, and they do amazing work to support the parents in this borough. So please do take advantage. Please do go on the Brilliant Parents website. We offer termly parenting courses, which are all free, delivered in the schools, etc., primary and secondary schools. So if you know of any parents that are going through challenges, let's not judge. Let's reach out, let's signpost them to the right places, because, as Andrez said, there is help locally in the borough. I think with that said, the last thing to mention to you, on your chairs, you do have a QR code. We'd love to get a sense of what you thought about today. So please do scan it, and there were some 5 or 6 quick questions there. If you've got your mobile phone, please do scan the QR code. And for those of you at home, there should be a poll coming up that you can actually fill that in, because we'd love to get a temperature of what you think of today, what you thought of today. And finally, if any of you are interested in becoming a parent champion, a volunteer parent champion, again, we've got some forms that you can fill in where you can help other parents. So with that said, I think we're going to close. Sufyan, would you like to say a few words just in closing? Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, first of all, thank you very much to Meave, Brilliant Parents, and thank you very much to Andre and the rest of the team who are streaming, etc. And a special Jazakumullah khairan thank you to all the parents and youngsters who are here today for this program. As you know, mashallah, Hayes Muslim Centre, we're trying our best to make to facilitate these kind of programs, especially for our people in and around the Hayes area, etc. So hopefully, let us know any more programs that you want to take place. Ijazba is around, mashallah, the board is there. If anybody wants more programs like these, please let us know. We can arrange them. We've got Meave here, we've got Andre, we can call him again for another program, hopefully. Yeah. So, and Meave, of course. But thank you very much once again to the entire team, and thank you very much for coming. That's pretty much it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Gracias. There's tea and coffee on that side, if anybody. Sorry? Biscuits as well. Don't forget the biscuits. There's biscuits as well. Yeah. It's free. Yeah. Got tea and biscuits. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'd love to just have a couple of you just give us a little testimonial of what you thought today. So please don't disappear. Oh, dear. Did you enjoy that? Very informative, wasn't it? Very informative. Yeah, very good, very good. Right, where would you set up, Sam, for your video? Okay, in front of the Brilliant Parents. That would be great. Okay.
Can you close up?
Do you need this for the interview? You need this for the interview?
Can we interview you about your experience? Yeah?
Is that okay?
Brilliant question, by the way. And then we might use it in our website.
Let him do the interview first, and then, I don't know. Do you want to ask questions, Sam? Is that what you normally do? You normally do it, don't you? I do it. Okay. Sorry, what's your name? Shazim. Okay. Where do you want us to stand?
Right here.
Shazim's going to be interviewed. He's going to give us an interview.
Lovely.
I'll ask him some questions.
Yeah, so.
And then we'll do that. Oh, that light is very bright.
No, that's because it's the projector.
Oh, right. Let me.
Do you want to sit down somewhere?
No, I'll just cover it.
Do you want 2 people? Do you want 1 person?
We can put it off. It's done, isn't it?
How many people do you want me?
2 would be good. Yeah, we can do it together.
I'm just doing it at the same time.
Yeah, we'll do it together. Do 2 together. Yeah.
Get the close. Come this way.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Okay, if you don't mind just holding that, and maybe you could just ask your
Okay.
questions.
So Shazim and Abdullah. Okay.
Do you object to your pictures being taken? No, it's fine.
We're going to put it on our social media. Thank you. We've got a form for you to sign. Let us know when you're ready. Ready? Hello, Shazim and Abdullah. Thank you so much for coming today. So what did you think about the talk by Andre?
I think, it was a great talk. He provided, quite insightful knowledge, and we were able to, be able to utilize that knowledge and, apply it in our everyday life. And I think it's quite necessary as well, especially in the area that we're living in the times in which crime rate is increasing. And there's a lot of questions surrounding this issue. And, having these talks is quite, is very important because you finally clarify a lot of issues and you're able to, really decrease the crime. And that's what we're trying to aim
That's what
for.
we're trying to do. And Abdullah, what did you think?
As a youth, personally, it was very beneficial to me and to everyone around. I think that because as a youth, we go to the outer world and we experience stuff which some people don't experience. And we have to bring the youth together and explain to them what's right and what's wrong. Because sometimes it's misleading, as society can portray things which look right but which are actually wrong, and they don't give us enough information, enough support that we feel we have the support we need.
And did he say anything in particular that sort of stood out to you today?
Mainly the thing that stood out, which everyone mainly knows about, is the police and the society and the government, which are meant to portray as support. But then if you look at inside the youth society, there's people who are dying, there are people who are being inside crimes because they fear the police, they fear the society, which the government gives and supports to the youth. So we have to create a way where there's a society which youth don't fear, where they can go to them and they feel that they're safe, not a society which is double way.
And do you feel more empowered now, do you think, when you're talking to your peers about, the issues that young people are going through and the challenges? Do you feel more empowered now that you'll be able to support them?
Yeah, I would say so because knowledge is power. When you're able to possess that knowledge, you're able to essentially spread the knowledge as well, and you know what's right and wrong, and you're able to you have a better understanding of the world, and that's what truly matters. Because when you're able to have a good perspective and you're able to have a knowledgeable perspective of society, you're able to provide solutions that actually work. And I think by listening to this talk and by listening to Andre coming here, we've been able to do that.
Oh, well, thank you both so much for coming, and thank you for your opinions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take a picture.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay.
You might want to do that again because we want to pick up you. Their mic isn't working. Can you ask a question? Put the mic in live. Hold it live.
Hello, my name's Harriott. I'm the Chief Executive and founder of the Liminality Group. I'm a criminologist, sociologist, systemic and psychodynamic practitioner, and I look forward on behalf of the charity Brilliant Parents to joining you down at the Hayes Muslim Centre on the 14th of February this year. We'll be looking at our work within community and custodial settings with complex children, and we'll also be considering some ways to try and keep children safe, but also to give an understanding about the current landscape. Look forward to seeing you there. Hello, my name's Andrez Harriott. I'm the Chief Executive and Founder of the Liminality Group. I'm a criminologist, sociologist, systemic and psychodynamic practitioner, and I look forward on behalf of the charity Brilliant Parents to joining you down at the Hayes Muslim Centre on the 14th of February this year. We'll be looking at our work within community and custodial settings with complex children, and we'll also be considering some ways to try and keep children safe, but also to give an understanding about the current landscape. Look forward to seeing you there. Hello, my name's Andrez Harriott. I'm the Chief Executive and Founder of the Liminality Group. I'm a criminologist, sociologist, systemic and psychodynamic practitioner, and I look forward on behalf of the charity Brilliant Parents to joining you down at the Hayes Muslim Centre on the 14th of February this year. We'll be looking at our work within community and custodial settings with complex children, and we'll also be considering some ways to try and keep children safe, but also to give an understanding about the current landscape. Look forward to seeing you there. Hello, my name's Andrez Harriott. I'm the Chief Executive and Founder of the Liminality Group. I'm a criminologist, sociologist, systemic and psychodynamic practitioner, and I look forward on behalf of the charity Brilliant Parents to joining you down at the Hayes Muslim Centre on the 14th of February this year. We'll be looking at our work within community and custodial settings with complex children, and we'll also be considering some ways to try and keep children.
So much for coming today. Can you just tell us where you're from?
Yeah, I'm David Bruff. I'm the chair. Oh. We've got to do it again.
I think so. Lucky he stopped us before we get too involved. Hello, David. Can you just tell us where you're from?
Yeah, I'm David Bruff. I'm the chair of the Hayes Town Partnership, which is a multi-agency body in Hayes that seeks to promote the community and bring the people together.
Well, we're delighted that you're able to come here today. Can you just tell us what you thought about today's session?
Well, I think it's another excellent initiative by Brilliant Parents. I think you're doing a great job in highlighting all of the issues that are affecting the community, and it was quite clear from today that there's lots of people who are worried about what's happening to some of the young people in the town, so this was a really good way of addressing some of the causes and some of the ways that we can try and tackle them.
Was there anything in particular today that maybe surprised you?
I think the one that really jumped out at me was the amount of money that is spent on drugs in this country. £9.3 billion. It just shows you what we're up against. It's a mega business that is pulling people into their world and making it really difficult for parents who are struggling with their children.
Absolutely. And Andrez spoke about the context, putting things in context. Was that a good starting point for you?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, there's too many sort of simple solutions that are not answering the problem. And just to talk about gang culture, you've got to look at why it's happening. And one particular thing I think is about having hope for young people, some prospects for their future, some jobs, some way of making their way in the world that doesn't involve getting into drug dealing.
Yeah.
Hold the mic closer to you.
Sorry, I'll
Yeah.
hold the mic a little bit closer to
Right,
you.
right.
Absolutely.
Right.
I think, he spoke about communication in terms of parenting,
Yes.
and everything starting in the home.
Definitely.
I mean, clearly, that's the work that Brilliant Parents are trying to do.
Yeah.
Is there anything you think that we could take away from today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important about getting people to realise that they've got to talk to their children, don't jump to conclusions, don't lecture them, try and win them over to your side as a parent. And
Absolutely.
yeah, communication is the key to it, definitely.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, David, for coming and for your continued support.
Right,
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you. Oh, go take a picture.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
Okay,
David.
sounds good.
Really.
Yes, definitely. I mean, he was amazing. I mean, he's well spoken, and he was touching on all the issues. It's reality. It seems that the person has seen it, and he's portrayed it to us, and he's got solutions as well. So yeah, I think everyone was very, very pleased, and we thank you for arranging that, and hopefully we can continue doing all that good work. And thank you.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Jazz. Oh, we'll take a picture. Did you just cross? Yeah. Okay, ready? Hello? Hello? Hello, Kadra and Hina. Thank you so much for coming today. Can you just tell me where you're from? What organisation?
Hi, thank you very much for giving us opportunity to attend this event today, Miv. I'm coming from Somali National Helpline. It's a charity organization. What Somali National Helpline does is interpretation, translation, and signposting information. Sometimes as well raising awareness about different topics in the interested community.
And Hima?
Well, my name is Hina, and I'm actually doing IAH Lifeline, and I come from Bangladesh community. And what I'm trying to do is break barriers and have the two community connected as one.
So the Somalian and the Bangladeshi community.
And also wanting in the Pakistani community
And
as
the
well.
Pakistani community. So tell me, what did you think about today?
Today's event was really amazing. I loved it. I can say it's like a 10 out of 10. Reason why it touched all the topics. So that was like really, we always discuss and raise awareness about it. And we love things like this to be on like bring back again to our community, so we can, benefit our community, how to understand youth culture.
Absolutely. And Hina?
I think it's quite brilliant actually, because it actually brings out what's actually happening out there, and it's just to be more informative for people who are unaware.
Yeah, absolutely. So
of
you think
things
it's going to help you help
It
your
will help.
clientele?
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
And we would like to thank brilliant parents for the effort, what they're doing for the community. Keep going.
Thank you so much,
Keep
Kadra.
up the good work.
Thank you, Kadra. Thank you, Hina. Thank you.
Kedra. Which one's Kedra?
Yes. I'm Kadra. Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Andre, last but not least by any means. So,
Thank you. I'll hold it right here. Thank you.
So we're just
Thank
gonna.
you for today.
Oh, thank you.
Pleasure,
Thank
yeah.
you. So we're just gonna. Not quite sure. We're just gonna do a little roundup.
1, 2, D4.
Andre, thank you so much for coming today. It's just been an absolute pleasure having you.
Such a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
I mean, the people that were here today, from the Pakistani community, the Somalian community, from Hayes,
Yes.
they really seem to benefit.
Yeah.
And the young boys that would just ask such great questions.
Phenomenal questions, completely engaged, and it's always good to get a temperature check and make sure that what you're saying is relevant to them. And they said it was relevant, so I think we've done a great job here today.
Absolutely, and the dads, they were like, thought, well, I didn't know this, and now I can think differently. Now I can approach my children differently.
That's the aim of what we wanted to do today. Keep the conversations going with you and your children, effective communication, but also let's not locate all the problems in the children. There are systemic and structural issues which contribute to kids becoming involved in things.
And I think that is so key, because I think oftentimes we blame ourselves as parents.
Yeah, of course.
We judge ourselves, society judges parents, and the fact that you started off with this context, which went right back to the beginning, giving parents an opportunity to think, my goodness, that may have happened to me or somebody that I know.
100%.
I didn't think that had an impact.
Yeah, from the birth canal. These children are at a disadvantage. And it doesn't mean they can't go on to do amazing things, but if we contextualise it, we stop going, it's all the kids, and we start going, what do we need to do to provide an antidote to some of this stuff?
And also, I think sometimes parents think, well, I was all right.
Yeah,
it didn't bother me. My parents did whatever, and I've turned out okay.
Yeah, but that was in the, respectfully, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, chastising and various things. It doesn't work anymore in the same way.
No.
You have to have open dialogue. The boundaries are far more fluid in terms of the conversations you need to be having with your children. Conversations about relationships and drugs and things on social media. You need to be creating a space where they can do it. If you don't, they'll do it elsewhere.
Absolutely. So that consciousness that we always talk about, and helping parents to have that awareness of what's happening in the home, what's happening outside the home, what's happening on the internet.
Absolutely.
It's a hard job.
It's hard. Well, that's why we're parents. But it's fluid.
Yeah.
And we've got to stop going back in my day.
Yeah.
It's not helpful.
No.
It's not helpful.
No. Andre, thank you so much.
Pleasure, Niamh. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you.
Cheers. Oh, good.
Oh.
Well, the response has been very good.
It has been, hasn't
The
it?
fact that people stayed to talk to me. Bless you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Andre.
Yeah? All good.
Nice one.
All right.